About this time every year, I tell myself, I'm gonna do this, and this to get ready for the garden. And every year I don't do any of it because I just get lazy. It's wintertime, it's cold. You get the wintertime blues, you don't wanna come outside. This year's gonna be different. I'm getting it done. I'm gonna show you what I'm doing. But first, I need to set you down. Let's do that first. It's February right now, and there's nothing growing in the garden, but that doesn't mean I can't start doing things to get ready for the gardening season, especially things that I don't normally do that I just kind of tell myself I need to do every year, but I always kind of just push it off and push it off and push it off, and before I know it, it's like May, and I'm just scrambling to get everything done. Now, what am I doing right now to get ready for the gardening season? The very first thing I do, and this is something that I do every single year, and I've honestly thought about kind of rotating the time of year that I do this, but no matter what, every year, this is what I do. I have a compost guy. He's got this dump truck and he can fit about 6 yards of compost in his dump truck. And I text him once a year. And it's funny because when I look at my text with him, it's just like a once a year thing. Hey, can I get some compost? Yeah, when do you want it? Hey, can I get some compost? That's what it's like every time. Pretty much what I'm doing is, let me turn this on real quick. There you go, you're following me now. So pretty much what I'm doing is, if you look at these raised beds here, they aren't filled up to the top anymore, and that's completely normal. And if you look over here, same thing. All of my beds have sunk down, and that's something that is natural, and it's gonna happen every year with your raised beds. What I do to kind of replenish the soil that has sunk down is I get compost. I don't mix it with any soil, anything like that. My wife is in there playing with the dogs, and it is so loud, so hopefully you can't hear it. I don't mix it with any soil whatsoever. I just put, it's 3 to 4 inches is what it went down this year, and I'm putting 3 to 4 inches of compost back into these raised beds. Last year, I didn't use any kind of fertilizer whatsoever. All I used was the original compost that fed my garden throughout the entire year. Compost is such an underutilized thing, and I feel like people talk about compost a lot, but for me, it is like the backbone of my garden. Hold on, let me stand up. So last year was the first year that I put in these raised beds and these arch trellises, and normally when you first put in raised beds, the first year or so, they're not gonna produce very well for you. The soil is still trying to kind of settle in and kind of build itself up and get all that bioactivity and everything. Well, I didn't have that problem last year, but I mixed my soil mixture was like 50-50 premium topsoil and compost mixture. And then the top 3 to 4 inches was pure compost. So I had a very compost heavy garden. And back when I was growing just in the ground, the same area, but in the ground, I was doing the same thing. What I would do is I would actually take all the leaves that would fall from my trees. Let's see if you can see all these trees behind me. I would take all the leaves that would fall from these trees and I'd rake them all up, and then I would just put them all over inside my garden and let them decompose throughout the winter. And then after that, as soon as springtime would come, I would come in and lay compost on top of all that. So I just have a lot of good nutrition inside my garden. And there was a few times that I did end up fertilizing, especially when I first moved into this place and just trying to get used to this space. But for the past couple of years, it's been nothing but compost. So putting compost in the top of my garden is at the absolute top of my priority list. But the problem that I run into quite often is I wait until like May to text my compost guy, or even June sometimes. And when I wait that long, there's a couple of issues that happen. One, his availability isn't always there, especially that time of year, because a lot of people are trying to get a hold of him. But for two, I'm putting that compost in and it doesn't have time for that nutrition to leach down. What I'm thinking I'm gonna do from here on out is I'm thinking I'm going to get the compost in the fall instead of the spring. If you put it down in the fall, it does a couple of things. So you're putting a nice mulch layer, more or less, on top of your garden. So what I wanna do is I wanna put the compost down and then still get all the leaves from out here in my yard and put that on top of the compost just as an additional layer. So that way I'm not having my beds just lay open like this all winter, because this is not good for them. At the end of my gardening season every year, a lot of the plants like my peppers and my tomatoes and stuff, I don't pull out the root systems of those plants. I leave them just completely intact. But what happens is I come here in the spring and I go to plant, and I do have a little bit of leftover. Let me see if I can get this out. A little bit of leftover here. So this is stuff that just didn't break down. So I'm gonna use this in my compost bin. And I would just keep this in here, but I'm trying to plant something exactly where this was, so it makes it kind of difficult. But this is just like a little decomposed root ball, and I'm pretty sure this is from a tomato. Yeah, this is where the tomatoes were. So I'm gonna pull these out right now, so that way when it comes time to put the compost in, I think next weekend is when the guy's coming, so when it comes time to put the compost in, I can lay the compost down. I don't have to worry about digging in and kind of getting stuck around this stuff when I'm trying to plant my plants. So that's something I'm doing right now. I got one here, got one over here. Make sure I shake it off and keep all the good stuff in there. So I've got a couple of these. There's a few more around the garden that I need to go around and get. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'll come back and show you one of the next things I'm doing. And it's the part that, this is one of those things where people on YouTube don't wanna show this stuff, especially me. I never would have, but I'm going to anyways. So let me come back. This should be something that I should have done in the fall, and I got like 95% of the way there and then just completely gave up. I got most of my plants out, I got most of my stuff out, and I gave up. But what I have all over the place is stuff like this. I've got just stuff laying around right here. I've got this super nasty, I don't even want to show you this. Are you ready? I've got this super nasty basket. Yeah, I've got this super nasty basket that's been sitting here all winter. So I'm gonna scrape this out into the compost pile, because that's where that needs to be, because it's kind of turned into its own little compost bin of its own. It's pretty nasty. But also stuff like this. I've got stuff like these sitting around all over the place, just garbage and junk and stuff that I should have taken care of way back in the fall, and I just didn't. So now's the time that I'm gonna do this, because I don't wanna do this when it's time to plant and really get the garden going. Another thing that I have all over the place is my tomato cages. I didn't end up putting them back into the garage like I should have. So I've got tomato cages here, and then let's see if the camera will follow me over here. Maybe. Ha! And I've also got tomato cages lining my fence back here. Oh, hi, Mr. Goat. Hi. The neighbors have a new goat, and he's adorable. But I've got tomato cages back here. I've got pepper cages over there. I just have so much junk that doesn't need to be out here. We are now in my front soon-to-be garden. I already have a couple of things out here. I've got my asparagus bed that is right here, and these are things that I honestly should have pruned way back in the fall. What I did is I let them die off completely, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna prune them as soon as they're completely died off. And then I ended up putting mulch around them, and I just kind of let them die and lay here. Now I'm gonna come through and prune some of this stuff out, because I need to get ready for these to start growing again, which is gonna be really soon. Let me move you down a little bit. This was asparagus that we planted last year, and I had covered it in mulch and just kind of let it completely die off. And this stuff stayed green pretty late. Like even after a couple snowfalls, this stuff was still green. And so I just let it stay there. I didn't want to bother it. If it was getting any energy from the sun whatsoever, I didn't want to ruin that. Now I need to go through and clean this up, because these are going to start growing again like really soon. We've had some warm days already, and I mean, we've got the weeds starting to grow in here, which I need to come in here and weed this too at some point. But asparagus is probably one of the things I'm most excited for in the garden. We planted them last year, but we didn't get to harvest any last year, because with asparagus, you can't harvest it that first year. And honestly, you can't really harvest it the second year either. But when I planted the asparagus crowns, some of them were already 2-year crowns. So even last year, I had some pretty good size asparagus shoots coming up. And it is honestly so hard to see the asparagus shoots come up and not harvest them and eat them, because they come shooting up and you've got perfectly good looking asparagus, but you need to let it grow so that way it can build the root system more and establish itself in the bed. 1 out of 10 don't recommend these pruning shears. What are your favorite pruning shears? I've got my eye on a couple different brands. I'm really hard on my pruning shears, and they didn't do very well with these ones. So looking for a new pair. Let me know what your brands are. This year, we'll probably harvest a couple, but not very many at all. I'll come in here and weed another day. Next up, we've got our peach tree. Oh, I'm tripping over my little raptor there. Next, we've got our peach tree. This peach tree we planted 2 springs ago. And what was really cool about this tree is how fast it grew. It blew my mind because this tree, when we bought it, was like waist tall. It was tiny. It quickly doubled its size within 1 year, and it actually gave us peaches the very next year. Peach trees are going to be a little bit different than apple trees. With an apple tree, you've got one main trunk that grows up and all the branches grow out of that main trunk. But with a peach tree, if you look down here, I've got one trunk that comes up about 2 feet, maybe 18 inches, and then the big branches come off of that. And I honestly don't want any branches below this main Y right here, because this main Y right here is where the main branches come out. I don't want anything down here, so let's go ahead and cut these off. The next important thing we need to think about is, and I'm not a professional at this, so don't take my word as like what to actually do. This is just what I'm doing. Sorry if it's loud, I got cars driving back and forth, but peaches need a nice open midsection. So any of these branches here that are going out into the middle of the tree, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these off. What's another thing important for me to think about right now is peaches are gonna grow on 1-year-old growth. So a lot of these small ones that I'm taking off that are coming into the middle, that's the size of branches that these peaches are gonna be growing on. Any of this stuff right here that's coming out this way, this is where I'm gonna have my peaches growing. I don't like how long this one is, so I'm gonna cut that, and I'm gonna thin this out just a little bit. But I like how it's kind of fingered out. This branch is going straight up, and I don't want this to get too tall, and I need to still come in here. And anything going towards the middle of the tree, I'm just gonna pull out, because that's the stuff that I should probably use sharp pruners for this. This is probably terrible for my tree, but this is what I got. Unless you tell me what brand to go with. I'm gonna be pulling these ones out of the middle. Anything going out in the middle. Right here, this one's going straight up. I don't want that. I want everything to fan outwards. I don't want anything kind of moving together, going straight up. I'm even gonna take this one off right here. And I don't want this to get too tall. I want this tree to stay nice and kind of compact, because let me show you what I'm doing, what my plan is here. If my camera will follow me through the tree. Hey, there we go. This whole area, I'm actually putting some more Vago beds. And if you watched my last video, I'm going heavy into Vago beds. I've got 16 that are already in the backyard. I've got another one that's gonna be going right here. Another one that's gonna be going right here. This area is going to be my front little kind of salad garden for my wife. I don't want this tree to shade out too much of what I got going on up here. Right here, I'm going to cut this nice and short, or at least short enough for me to reach. I'm going to keep going with this, and I'll come back as soon as I have this pruned. All right, that's a pretty heavy pruning. But I'm okay with that. I like to experiment a little bit and kind of see what I can get away with in terms of how small I can keep this tree. Now, anything that was coming out at like a 90-degree angle, I got rid of that. At least most of it. I cut it off, because if you have branches coming out at a 90-degree angle and you start getting loaded up with peaches, those branches are going to get weighed down and potentially break. If you got something that's coming out more at like a 45-degree angle, that's what you want. So this stuff that's coming out here, 45-ish. This one's actually closer to 90. Let's pull that. But you want a lot of 45-degree angles to support that weight. Now, I know that this tree produced a lot of fruit last year. So I cut off, and I had to do a lot of thinning out. So I went through, when the peaches started setting, I went through and just started pulling so many peaches off. Because if you have too many peaches too close together, you're gonna end up with a lot of really small peaches. So what we did is we pulled them off and made it to where we were about every 6 inches, we let a peach stay on the tree. And that worked out really well for us. We have some friends that they've got a peach tree, and they let their peaches just kind of run wild, do whatever they want. And they ended up with a lot smaller peaches than us. So we thinned out quite a bit. We ended up with really big, nice, juicy peaches that were just amazing. So my thought process behind this is, if I remove some of these branches that were just too close together as it is, then I won't have to go through and thin any of those peaches out. I'll still have to just pull peaches off that are too close together on the same branch. Oh, this one's coming into the middle of the tree. So is that one, kind of. Anyways, I'm okay experimenting. If I pull too much off this tree, it's not gonna be a big deal to me. We're actually planting quite a few more fruit trees this year in the backyard, so I'm excited about that. Now, another thing I've been working on right now is onions and getting all my onions planted out. These ones are gonna be our bigger onions. These are candy onions. That's what we got this year. So with these ones, these are going to be the big bulbing onions. So we planted them all, gave them a little bit too much water earlier. We planted them all in here, and as they grow, we're going to chop them about 6 inches above the pot here. But then when they're ready to go out in the garden, we're going to pull all of them out of here and separate them all at the roots. This is just an easy way to save some space with your onions. You can plant them all in one big thing like this, and the roots are actually pretty strong and they break apart relatively easily. So these are all just going to stay in here until they're ready to go out into the garden out back. And then these are also going to be grown in little bunches here, but these are going to stay in bunches. I'm not going to separate them because these are bunching onions. These are ones that I'm really excited about with my wife and all of her awesome soups that she makes.